Elias Bram was 39 years old, a project manager at a mid-sized commercial construction firm on the north side. A man who wore steel-toed boots to the office because he still walked sites twice a week and saw no reason to change shoes. He drove a 9-year-old truck. He carried the same brown leather planner he'd carried since his second year in the trade. That Wednesday evening in early October, he came home to find his wife at the kitchen table with a manila envelope in front of her and a man's coat on the back of his own chair. She said the coat belonged to Marcus Vane, his boss, and that she was leaving him for Marcus, and that Marcus had been very clear he could give her the life Elias never would. Elias looked at the coat. He said, "All right." He picked up the envelope. He left. What he didn't tell her, what she had never once thought to ask, was who actually owned the company Marcus Vane ran. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something burned at the edges. She had been trying a new recipe. There was a wine glass at her place, and none at his, and the second glass, the one she had poured for the man whose coat was on the chair, was on the counter by the sink, rinsed, but not put away. Elias noticed all of it the way he noticed things on a walkthrough. He did not comment. He set his planner on the counter beside the rinsed glass. He said her name once, softly, the way you say a name to see if someone is going to look up. Her name was Corinne Bram. She was 36. She had been an assistant vice president at a regional bank for 4 years, and before that, an executive assistant at 3 other places, none of which had held her for long. She had married Elias 8 years ago in a courthouse ceremony he had paid for out of a savings account she did not know the size of. She wore, that evening, a dress he had never seen before, and shoes that were not the shoes she wore to work. She had, he understood without needing to be told, been getting ready for something before he came home. She had simply not expected him to come home at the exact moment he did. She said, "Sit down, Elias. There's something I need to tell you." He did not sit down. He said, "Whose coat?" She took a breath. She had prepared the breath. He could tell by the way it arrived. "It's Marcus's. Marcus Vane. Your boss." Elias looked at the coat again. It was a good coat. Charcoal wool, no visible label from where he stood, but the shoulder was cut well. He had seen Marcus wear it into 2 board meetings and a lunch. "Marcus is here." He left. "He'll come back in an hour if you want to talk to him. But I asked him to give us a chance to speak first." She had rehearsed that sentence too. She told him, in the next 4 minutes, the version of things she had been assembling in her head for what he suspected was at least 6 months. That she had not been happy for a long time. That she had tried to be. That she and Marcus had connected at a client dinner in April, and that it had, at first, been nothing, and had then been something. That Marcus had told her he was not the kind of man who took commitments lightly, and that when he made a decision, it was because he had thought about it from every angle. That he had thought about her from every angle. That he could give her the life she had wanted and had been too polite to ask Elias for. She said the word polite like it was the worst word she knew. She did not say the word sorry. She said once, "I'm sorry you're having to find out this way," which is a different sentence entirely. Elias listened. He did not interrupt. He did not sit down. When she finished, she slid the manila envelope across the table. She said, "Marcus' attorney had these drawn up. There's no ambiguity. It's clean. I'm asking you to sign them." He picked up the envelope. He weighed it in his hand the way he weighed a set of drawings before he opened them. He looked at her once more. He said, "All right." He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He didn't set the envelope down and walk out. He tucked it under his arm the way he tucked a set of blueprints. He picked up his planner. He walked past the coat on the chair without touching it. He opened the front door. He closed it behind him without slamming it. He would later mark that Wednesday as the last time he believed his wife had told him a single true thing about who she was. 3 years earlier, on a Saturday morning in June, Elias Bram had sat across from a woman named Ivy Hahn at a lawyer's office on the 7th floor of a building he owned, but had not yet told his wife he owned. Ivy Hahn was his general counsel. She had been his general counsel for 7 years, since before there was very much company to be counsel for. She was patient in the way of people who had spent their 20s being underestimated in rooms full of men who were wrong about her. "You want to hire a president," she said. "You want to keep your name off the door. You want to keep coming to work in your boots and running the field side. And you want the president to report to you privately, in writing, through me. That's it. And you don't want Corinne to know. I don't want anyone at the firm to know. Corinne especially. She has been very clear about the kind of man she thinks she married. I would like to remain that man in her mind for a while longer." Ivy had looked at him for a long moment. She had said, "Elias, I'll do this because you asked. But you should understand what you are building. You are building a company that will grow. And you are building a marriage on a version of yourself that isn't the whole of you. Those two things will meet at some point." He had said, "I know." He had known. He had simply thought, at the time, that when they met it would be because he was ready to tell her, because the company had grown into something he could show her with pride, and she would understand why he had kept it quiet. And the meeting of the two would be a moment of revelation, not of collapse. He had built the company from a 2-truck subcontracting outfit in his uncle's driveway. That was what Corinne knew. She had watched him work 80-hour weeks the first 2 years of their marriage and had never once, in that whole time, asked to see the books. He had, in the 3rd year, moved the operation into a small warehouse she visited exactly twice. In the 4th year, he had acquired a competing firm at a distressed price and folded it in. In the 5th year, he had done it again. By the 7th year, the parent holding company, Bramwell Holdings, registered in Delaware, sole shareholder Elias J. Bram, controlled 4 operating subsidiaries, held $91 million in signed contract backlog, and employed 240 people. Corinne knew none of this. She knew he worked at a construction firm. She knew he had, in her words, plateaued in middle management. She had said it at her sister's wedding, loudly, and he had let her, because letting her had, at the time, seemed like the more loving thing to do. He understood now that it had not been loving. It had been an accommodation. Accommodation and love, he would later realize, were not the same thing. Marcus Vane had been hired as president of the flagship operating subsidiary, Bram Vane Construction, a name Marcus himself had suggested because he liked the way it looked on letterhead, 4 years into the arrangement. His compensation package was generous. His authority was real. He had, in exchange, signed an employment agreement drafted by Ivy Hahn that included, among its more standard provisions, a fiduciary duty clause, a non-compete, and a section on conduct that could constitute cause for termination without severance. Marcus had read that section. He had signed it anyway. Most people did. He reported, on paper, to a holding company chairman he had been told was a private investor who preferred not to be involved in operations. He had never met the chairman. He had been told, in his onboarding, that the chairman's identity was confidential for reasons related to the chairman's other business interests. Marcus had accepted this. It was, he had thought at the time, a mark of the seriousness of the enterprise. Real money worked that way. He had never once, in 4 years of running the company, asked to see the shareholder register. That was what Elias had not understood, going in, that a certain kind of man, once he was in the office he wanted to be in, stopped asking questions about the walls. Elias slept, that first night after Corinne told him, at a hotel 3 blocks from the office. He did not tell anyone where he was. He turned his phone off at 9 and turned it back on at 6. There were 11 messages. 2 from Corinne. 9 from Marcus. He read Corinne's first. The first was long. It said she hoped he would take some time to process, that she wanted to be respectful of his feelings, that she thought if they handled this maturely, they could all move forward without unnecessary damage. The second, sent 2 hours later, was shorter. It said she needed the signed papers by Friday because Marcus was traveling next week, and she wanted this handled before he left. He read Marcus's messages next. They were, in order, an apology, a request to meet, a longer apology, a clarification that he had not intended for things to happen this way, a note that he wanted to be transparent with Elias about certain things at work given the personal situation, a request that Elias take some personal time, a note that HR had been notified as a precaution, a note that HR had discussed whether Elias's continued presence on projects Marcus supervised was tenable, and finally, at 4:47 that morning, a message that read, think it's best we quietly restructure your role. I'll have HR come to you today. This isn't personal. M. Elias read the last message twice, not because it upset him, because he wanted to note carefully how fast Marcus had moved from apology to termination. He wanted to remember the exact shape of it. He forwarded all 9 messages to Ivy Hahn. He wrote, in the body of the email, "I'll be in your office at 9. Please have Devin there." Devin was Devin Osai, the forensic accountant Ivy had brought on retainer 3 years earlier for reasons neither of them, at the time, had needed to specify. Ivy's office was on the 7th floor of the building Elias owned, and had not yet told Corinne he owned. It was small, deliberately. Ivy did not believe in status through square footage. She had a good chair, a good desk, 1 wall of books, and 1 window that looked east toward the river. When Elias came in at 8:52, she was already there, and Devin was already there, and the coffee was already made. She said, "How are you?" He said, "I'll tell you in 6 months." She nodded. She said, "Sit down. I've been up since 3. I want to walk you through what I found." She had, in the 6 hours between Elias's email and his arrival, done 3 things. She had pulled Marcus Vane's employment file, his corporate credit card records for the past 18 months, and the corporate expense reports for the same period. She had, in doing so, noticed a pattern that she wanted Devin to formalize before she said the word aloud. Devin had, in the last 4 hours, formalized it. There were 17 charges on Marcus's corporate credit card that Devin flagged as personal use disguised as business. 6 were dinners at restaurants where the second attendee, per Marcus's expense notes, was listed as client development. Devin had cross-referenced the reservations. 4 of the 6 had been made under the name Vane, party of 2. 1 had been made under the name C. Bram, party of 2. The reservation date was 7 months earlier. The restaurant was a place Elias and Corinne had gone for their 5th anniversary. Elias looked at the printout. He set it face down on the table. He did not say anything. There was more. There was a hotel charge in the neighboring state, a Friday night in July, coded as conference travel. There was no conference. There was a jewelry charge, coded as client gift, for an amount that was not the amount you spent on a client. There was a lease payment, drawn from a corporate operating account Marcus had signatory authority on, for a downtown apartment Marcus did not live in. Devin had checked the address. The apartment was in Corinne's name. Ivy watched Elias's face. She said, "The company has been carrying her lease for 11 months. Elias said, "How much?" $41,200, all in, plus the incidental charges I just walked you through. Total misappropriation so far identified is $118,000. There will be more. Devin is still working." Elias looked at the printouts. He looked at Devin. He said, "Keep working. I want it airtight." He turned to Ivy. He said, "What does the employment agreement give me?" She said, "Cause termination without severance. Clawback of the last 2 years of bonus, which comes to just under $400,000. Forfeiture of unvested equity, which is on paper significant, but which he doesn't yet know is worthless, because it was structured to vest on a liquidity event that isn't happening. And referral to the state licensing board for review of his contractor license, which, given the personal use of company accounts, is not a stretch." Elias said, "Civil action, available fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, conversion of corporate assets, recoverable damages plus punitive, criminal, available, but that goes through the DA, and once we open that door we don't control the pace. My recommendation is we handle the civil piece first and hold the criminal referral in reserve." Elias was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the window at the river. He said, "What about Corinne?" Ivy said, "She's on the lease. She's on 2 of the restaurant reservations. She accepted a piece of jewelry that was purchased on the corporate card. She is, at minimum, a beneficiary of the fraud. Depending on what she knew, she may be a participant. I would not personally want to be her attorney right now." Elias nodded. He said, "Send Marcus a note back. Cordial. Tell him I appreciate his professionalism and I'll be taking the personal time he suggested. Tell him HR should hold on any restructuring until I've had a chance to think. Buy me 2 weeks." Ivy said, "You want him comfortable. I want him confident. Confident men sign things. He didn't move fast." That was the part Marcus and Corinne had never been able to see about him. They had spent between them something like 18 months deciding what kind of man he was. They had been wrong about the important thing. They had mistaken his quiet for the absence of a strategy. It wasn't. His quiet was his strategy. It was just the one they had never had reason to watch him use. He spent the 2 weeks doing 3 things. He met with Ivy every morning at 7. She and Devin walked him, line by line, through the fraud package. By the end of the first week, they had 141 pages of documentation. By the end of the second, they had 280. Every charge was tied to a receipt. Every receipt tied to a merchant. Every merchant tied to a person. Every person tied to a date and a place. It was the cleanest forensic package Devin had ever assembled. He said so. He met with the 3 other members of the holding company's advisory board, a semi-retired developer, a former state banking commissioner, and Ivy, and briefed them on the situation. They agreed, unanimously, that Marcus Vane would be terminated for cause at a formal meeting the following Wednesday, that the civil complaint would be filed the same afternoon, that the criminal referral would be prepared but not filed pending Marcus's cooperation with the civil resolution, and that the state licensing board notification would go out by close of business Wednesday regardless. He met with a divorce attorney named Rhea Alcott, whom Ivy had recommended, and gave her the full financial picture of the marriage. The house, which Corinne believed she owned jointly, had been purchased through a trust structure Ivy had set up before the marriage. Corinne was not on the deed. The joint checking account contained $43,000. Elias's actual net worth, held through the holding company, was north of $32 million. Corinne had signed a prenup she had, at the time, dismissed as a formality Elias's paranoid uncle had insisted on. She had not read it carefully. Rhea had. It was, Rhea said, an unusually clean document. It would hold. On the Tuesday evening before the meeting, Elias sent Marcus a short message. Marcus, appreciate the space. Wanted to let you know I've thought it over, and I'm ready to sit down with you in HR Wednesday to discuss transition. Ivy Hahn will be in the room representing the holding company side. 10A. M. 7th floor conference room. E. Marcus replied within 4 minutes. E. Glad to hear it. This is the right call for everyone. See you at 10 M. Corinne texted him that same night, 20 minutes later. She said she was glad he was being reasonable. She said Marcus had told her he was proud of him. She said the papers were still on the table, and she hoped he would be ready to sign by end of week. He did not reply. She thought this was already over. He arrived at the 7th floor at 9:22. He was 40 minutes early. On any job site he had ever run, the foreman who arrived last was already behind. The conference room had a long walnut table, 16 chairs, and a window that looked east toward the river. Ivy had chosen the room for the light. At 10 in the morning, the sun came in over the shoulder of whoever sat with their back to the window. Elias sat with his back to the window. He set his planner on the table in front of him. He did not open it. Ivy came in at 9:44 with a folder. Devin came in at 9:47 with a laptop and a projector remote. The head of HR, a woman named Priya Menendez, came in at 9:51. She had been briefed the previous afternoon. She sat to Elias's left. She had a folder of her own. Marcus arrived at 10:03. That was the first signal. He came in wearing the charcoal coat. He was carrying a leather folio. He had brought no attorney. He glanced around the room, registered that there were more people present than he had expected, and made the small adjustment of a man who has decided, in the space of 2 seconds, to interpret this as a sign of the seriousness with which his transition plan was being taken. He smiled at Elias. He said, "E. Thanks for making the time." Elias said, "Sit down, Marcus." Marcus sat. He set his folio in front of him. He looked at Ivy, whom he had met twice before at compliance trainings, and gave her the small, professional nod he gave to attorneys. Ivy did not return it. Priya spoke first. She said, "Marcus, before we discuss transition, there are some matters we need to walk through. I'd like to ask you to hold questions until we finish. Ivy will lead the conversation." Marcus said, "Of course. Whatever you need." Ivy opened her folder. She placed the first document on the table. "This is your employment agreement, signed 4 years ago. On page 9, section 7, there is a definition of cause for termination without severance. I'll draw your attention to subsections C and E, which cover conversion of corporate assets and breach of fiduciary duty. I'd like to walk you through why we are here today." Marcus's expression did not change. His hands changed. He set the folio, which he had been holding, down on the table. She placed the second document beside the first. It was Devin's forensic summary. The top page was the aggregate. $118,000 in identified misappropriation, 17 flagged transactions, $41,200 in unauthorized lease payments to an apartment in the name of Corinne Bram, and a supplementary section, still in draft, on 11 additional transactions Devin had identified over the weekend. Marcus looked at it. He said, "Ivy, there's context to some of these. Client development travels, sometimes the coding. Marcus, I asked you to hold questions." He stopped. She placed the third document. It was the lease, Corinne's signature at the bottom, Marcus's signature as guarantor, drawn from a corporate operating account he had signatory authority on, but no authorization to use for personal purposes. She placed the fourth document. It was a printout of the reservation records from the restaurant on their 5th anniversary. C. Bram, party of 2. 7 months earlier. She placed the 5th. It was a photograph of a piece of jewelry, cross-referenced with the corporate charge, and a follow-up receipt from the jeweler showing the recipient's initials engraved on the inside of the band. C. B. Marcus's face did something in the 6th second after the 5th document landed. It was not quite fear. It was the specific look of a man watching a structure he had built realize it was built on the wrong foundation. Ivy said, "Marcus, I want to be precise about what we are and are not doing here today. We are terminating your employment for cause under Section 7, subsections C and E. We are clawing back the last 2 years of your bonus, which totals $392,000 per the clawback provision on page 11. We are forfeiting your unvested equity, which you should know was structured to vest on a liquidity event that will not be occurring. We are filing a civil complaint this afternoon for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conversion, seeking damages plus punitive. We are notifying the state licensing board this afternoon." She paused. "We are not, today, filing the criminal referral. That referral is drafted. Whether it is filed will depend on the terms of your cooperation with the civil action over the next 30 days. You should discuss that decision with an attorney. You should retain one today." Marcus opened his mouth. He said, "Ivy, I'd like to speak with Elias privately for 1 minute." Ivy said, "Elias is not the person you should be speaking with. Elias is the chairman of the holding company that owns this firm. He is the sole shareholder. He has been for the entire duration of your employment. Your reporting line, which you were told routed through a private investor, has always terminated with him." The room went quiet. It was quiet in a way that was different from polite silence. Elias counted the seconds. He counted 7. Marcus's face went through 5 things in the space of 2 seconds. Recognition, confusion, disbelief, understanding, and then a very specific stillness that was not composure but its opposite. Elias stood. He had brought only the planner. He had not opened it. He picked it up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked toward the door. He stopped in the doorway. He turned. He looked at Marcus. He said it quietly, only for him. "You didn't take my wife, Marcus. You took a woman who was already gone. What you took from me was the last 4 years of my patience. That one I intend to bill for." He walked out without looking back. Corinne came to the office at 2:14 that afternoon. She had not been invited. She had heard from Marcus at 11:30 and had spent the intervening hours making phone calls no one was answering. She asked, at the ground floor security desk, for Elias Bram. The security guard, whose name was Terrence and who had worked at the building for 6 years, checked his tablet. He said, "Ma'am, there's no Elias Bram on our employee directory." She said, "He works here. He's a project manager." Terrence looked at his tablet again. He said, "Ma'am, the name on the building is Bramwell Holdings. Mr. Bram is the chairman. He's on the 7th floor. Do you have an appointment?" She did not. She stood in the lobby for a long time. It did not happen all at once. The civil complaint was filed the same afternoon. Marcus retained counsel by Friday. He settled within 9 weeks, for an amount that consumed his savings and a portion of a house his ex-wife had also expected to keep. The state licensing board suspended his contractor's license pending review. The criminal referral was held, and then, when Marcus's cooperation proved incomplete, filed. He pleaded to a misdemeanor and paid a fine. He did not go to jail. He also did not work in commercial construction again. Corinne's divorce filing collapsed under the prenup she had not read. She left the marriage with the contents of the joint checking account and her personal property. The apartment lease, which the company had been carrying, was terminated. She moved within 6 weeks back to the city where her sister lived. She got a job at a smaller bank. She was, in the language of the aftermath, reduced to the life her choices had built. She was not destroyed. She was carrying the weight of what she had chosen, the way a person carries something they cannot set down. Not dramatically, just constantly. Elias moved his office to the 7th floor. He kept the boots. He kept the truck. He hired a new president for the flagship subsidiary, a woman named Renata Osai, who had been a superintendent at a competitor and who had, in her interview, asked to see the shareholder register on the first day. He gave it to her. 14 months after the Wednesday in the kitchen, on a Saturday morning in late fall, Elias walked a job site downtown. It was one of Bramwell's largest, a 9-story mixed use. The crane still up, the concrete pour on the 4th floor scheduled for Monday. He was in his boots. His name was on the hard hat, though the letters were small and no one on site made anything of it. He stopped to crouch beside a junction box. He told the electrician to move the 93 inches toward the beam. The electrician said, "Copy that, boss." Elias kept walking. At the far end of the site, near the fencing, the fig tree in the small landscaped plaza the city had required was putting out late leaves. Elias stopped for a moment. He watched a pigeon land on the top of the fence and walked 2 steps. He watched it fly off. He put his planner in his coat pocket. He walked toward the trailer. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.